Hi, gentlemen. Class of 2020. Mr. Connolly here with your daily guidance update, and it is March 30th, Monday. And I have two items for you, and one or both of these may not be relevant to you, but I'm just going to share them with you and post the links below this message. The first is if you're applying to University of Toronto and you are thinking about applying to residence, and I know maybe neither of those situations applies to you, but for a few of you it might. One of the quirks of U of T is that their residence application is earlier. In some cases, you have to submit it before you're even accepted to University of Toronto. So at this moment, the first date is actually tomorrow, March 31st. There's a Star Res application that you have to fill in, and that's to hold your spot with the first year residence guarantee. You can still apply for residence after that point, but the first year residence guarantee may not be there after that. So if you are even thinking about applying to the residence system at U of T, and especially at the St. George campus, you want to put that Star Res application in ASAP. Now, keep in mind, these residence applications are going to be communicated to you directly, either via email or through the university portals. We don't get CC'd. We don't get all of the university application dates sent to us. So don't rely on us to tell you when you have to apply to residence. That's your responsibility as part of your research. I happen to be telling you about the U of T one because it's a bit of a quirk. Most residence applications are later. U of T is quite early, and I have a friend at U of T who sent me this, so I thought I'll just share it with you at the moment. The second item is about students with IEPs. So individualized education plans, specifically students who are working with a learning exceptionality. So for example, giftedness, ADHD, a learning disability, something for which you receive accommodations for your learning or your assessment or your environment. Could also refer to students that have a physical disability, for example. In any case, if you have an IEP, be aware that you will have some work to do to arrange accommodations for yourself when you get to university. And I know many of you are still making decisions and waiting on offers, but I thought this would be a good opportunity for those of you with IEPs to do some research into the accessibility services of the universities to which you've applied. So I'm going to post a link for all the Ontario universities. You have to do your own research if it's out of province, but I'm going to post a link for all the Ontario universities below and their accessibility offices. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that your IEP is a document for high school, for your education in the elementary and secondary school system. When you graduate, it kind of graduates. So you can't just carry it over to university. In other words, you can't walk into your university with your IEP in hand that was prepared at St. Mike's by our LEC and ask for the same accommodations. Number one, they may not offer the same level of accommodation. Their accommodations may be different. Number two, their document requirements are going to be different than what you would encounter in high school. And specifically, they're going to want to see original documentation. So for most things, for example, if you have ADHD or a learning disability, they're going to want to see a psychoeducational assessment and complete profile, and they're going to want that to be fairly recent. So if you had something like that done with a psychologist in, say, grade 8 or grade 9, that may not travel with you to university. You may need to have a more recent one done. And I mention it now because a lot of things are closed right now, and so it may take a while to actually get in to see a psychologist. It takes a while at the best of times. So if that's something you're going to need, you probably want to start researching it now. Often what they'll do is they'll look at whatever documentation you have, a doctor's note, an old psych ed assessment, an occupational therapist's report, are just a few examples. And they'll give you interim accommodations, meaning we'll give you like a limited accommodations for a short period of time, but they're still going to want you to follow up with whatever the complete documentation that's required. So you need to look into those requirements. Common accommodations at universities would include like exam accommodations, extra time, alternate format, assistive technology, that you're allowed to use during exams. Note taking is a common one. So the professor or the tutorial instructor may ask the class if there's someone who's willing to take notes and photocopy them for you. Those are some accommodations. There are others that may be provided by the individual universities, but definitely something to do some research into. Now, sometimes the question comes up, if I have an IEP, will that help me with admissions? The short answer is generally no, in the sense that your marks are your marks in most cases. The way the university looks at it is, you had an IEP, you had accommodations, whether or not you access them as effectively as you could have. You had those accommodations, and therefore you had the level playing field. So we're looking at your marks. So this process is very different than what's known as a letter of special circumstances, which may apply to a few of you. A letter of special circumstances is something you submit for something that's recent, that's usually like a one-off, and that's significant in your life and that directly impacted your ability to perform on the marks in the courses that are being used for your university admission. So that could include something like an unexpected death in the immediate family that affected you. It could be a hospitalization that you weren't expecting, or a serious illness. It could be something like a traumatic injury that you sustained and that took you out of commission for a while, and therefore you didn't do as well. Those are something that you might consider putting together a letter of special circumstances for. In most cases, they're going to also want to see some kind of medical or other documentation to support your claims in the letter of special circumstances. And these aren't standard, so there isn't one form you fill out and submit to the OUAC. For example, you have to contact the individual university's admissions offices. In some cases, they ask you just to write a letter. And you have to write the letter, by the way. It's not written by someone else. So the school doesn't write it for you, or your doctor doesn't write it, although you may have a doctor's note to attach. You write the letter of special circumstances, explain what happened and how that's affecting your ability to perform academically, and why you think that should be considered in your admission process. In some cases, just a letter. In other cases, universities may have their own form they want you to fill in and then scan it or email it or fax it or whatever the requirement is. So you want to do a little bit of research about that. If you need some help with the wording, or you want someone to proofread it for you, by all means reach out to your guidance counselor. You could send it to us and we could give you advice on whether it's even worth submitting, or whether we could suggest any amendments to it, or change the wording or whatever. We're glad to give you some input, as of course we're glad to give you input into anything related to guidance or university admissions that you may be having questions about. Okay, so please keep in touch, keep working hard, keep an eye on your applications, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help. Okay, have a great rest of your day.